So the people that exist on the Darling Downs, we're part of the Wakka Nation or language group. Our clan group, I suppose, if you like, you will use the analogy of Australia as being a nation, and within that nation, we all speak the same language, which is English, similar to the Wakka Nation. Our tribal boundaries traditionally were divided by topographical features that exist, such as on the east, the escarpment, and also watersheds, mountains, other significant landscape features, I guess. But what I'm here to talk about, this is one of the staging points, Gummingurru, for the gatherings that used to occur up on the Bunyas that were hosted by the Wakka. And the Wakka of the Darling Downs were also known as, and you may have heard, a lot of people from town here in Toowoomba, Jarawoir. Jarawoir pertains to our role as being the host or giver. That's what it literally translates to. So we would host people up to the Bunyas. So I'll just touch, it's a bit of a funny angle, yeah. Can we go back one? Sorry, Connie. Yeah, so Gummingurru's just about 15 k's out of town. It's one of many sites that would have existed on the journeys up on our songlines to the Bunyas. So on the journeys, people would travel from as far north south as central highlands, like around Glen Innes and stuff like that, in northern New South Wales, and across to the coast up to, say, Gladstone in the north, and west as far as the fish traps at Barona and Kuma country and Mariwara tribe. Yeah, people would travel for hundreds of k's in every direction to participate in these ceremonies. And things that occurred up on the mountain were things like trade of resources, dispute settlement, marriage arrangements, and people would talk about tribal boundaries and things like that. And it also strengthened alliances between different mobs. So on the journeys up, not all the young Gippa or the uninitiated boys would have been able to participate in the ceremony and sit with the men up on the mountain. So they'd go through a series of stages or rites of passage to be able to sit in the larger gatherings on the mountain. So Gummingurru is one of those sites where those rites of passage would be conducted. So it's been dated approximately between 3,000 and 6,000 years old. And it's always been a place of sharing, and so too, not only just the site itself, but the whole concept around the Bunyas. It's always been a sharing place. So we'd share the bounty of the nut. And so the name Gummingurru is actually pertains to the southern extent of the Wakka language. So like I said, the significant topographical features such as major waterways and things like that, or that indicate the extent of your tribal boundary, and the extent of a language group in this instance is Gummingurru, which means men of the river. That was a name chosen by a bunch of elders in the late 90s when we were looking at getting the land handed back. Yeah, so ceremony was always held there up until the turn of the century, before the Act started rounding everybody up and taking everybody to reserves and missions. So that's pretty much when it sort of died out. Yeah. So the initiation ceremonies that occurred there required a high degree of self-discipline, pain, endurance, and psychological tolerance. The rites of passage ceremonies include the allocations of totems, or what's known as totem. We actually call Yuri, and you'd become one with that animal. It's your responsibility to administer. It's like a form of conservation, I suppose, and stops over-exploitation. I think Mary before when he was talking, same concept. We don't want a particular species to be over-exploited, so you'll be given a totem and you become one or a brother of that animal, and you're the protector of that animal, and you'd be telling people you can't hunt an emu now because he's nesting or he's sitting on his eggs and things like that. So you'd be able to tell everybody else not to eat it. And also with plants and stuff, they all have intricate relationships with each other. So those sort of responsibilities were given to you through these ceremonies. So on the site, the site has these totems depicted and in a form of stone arrangements. And as you go through ceremony, we didn't have a chieftain or a monarchy system. We had a elder sort of system. We'd respect knowledge holders. So as you go through these ceremonies throughout your lifestyle, it's not a one-off thing. It's like being in emergency services or in the army. You go through a series throughout your lifetime, and you'll be given a scar which represents your participation of going through these ceremonies, and others would be able to recognize you. Normally you'd get a totem, the totems that are associated with yourself, and also others, and you'd be able to see somebody, oh, that man's very knowledgeable because he's been through so many ceremonies, and he'd hold a lot of knowledge. And that was one of the forms of our identification of important people within the tribe, was this body scarification. So how this site was preserved is a bit of a story. Is like I said, when people were coming up and settling in the late 1800s and the 1870s, they'd come and select a property. The government would then you just have to improve the land. One of those properties where this site was situated was set up by the Wakka family. And the Wakka family were of the belief that enough had been taken from Indigenous people. So they let us, this was just before the Act came in, so there were still people travelling country, and they were aware of the presence and things going on, but they just left us alone. And then just after the Second World War, the people who had the adjacent property were the Gilbert family. They're quite well known in town. They're very good people. And Ben Gilbert, after his return from service, he purchased the Walker's property, and his daughter was about 7 years old approximately when she came back to up to the house and said, and she was asked, oh, where have you been? She said, I've been down the fairy rings. And he was a bit puzzled and said, what fairy rings? So he went and found it. And he was a very curious man by nature, very inquisitive, and he wanted to find out more. So he actually went and contacted the University in Brisbane and the Queensland Museum. They sent out some archaeologists or anthropologists in the late 40s, early 50s, and they come and said it's a really intact, pristine ceremonial site. And they did some rough managing, the old Chinese survey way. And that, like I just mentioned, Ben was a very curious man. That wasn't enough for him. So he pursued the matter further, and he contacted my great Uncle Bunda, whose image is up there. Uncle Bunda, he was one of the very few people that would never take him from country. He used to work on Giabul Station with Giabul, with Sir Joshua Bell, and Sir Joshua Bell actually got him exemption from getting taken away to the mission. So, although the rest of his family had been taken away. So, Uncle Bunda's father was Gundia, or doctor, and he used to travel around healing people. And one of those places that he would travel as a boy, Uncle Bunda, he was born in the 1870s, so he would travel with his father to Gummingurru, not itself, but there's obviously other associated sites around the place. One of them being the main camp, which is approximately 3 kilometres to the northeast of the site, but he learned some of the stories and that were associated with those juries that occurred on the site. And oh yeah, okay, I'm talking too much. Sorry, that's good. I'm very nervous and I talk a lot when I'm nervous. Yeah, so okay, Uncle Bunda and Ben Gilbert, they had their own little ceremony on the site. He passed some knowledge that he knew about the site to Ben Gilbert, and he gave Ben Gilbert the name Banda. Banda means protector, because he was protecting the site. And today we honour Banda and call our little culture centre that we got there the Banda Culture Centre. It was because of these guys that the place still exists, and the land has been handed back, and we're the custodians of the place now. we've been on a bit of a journey. We've teamed up with BPAC, the Bundy People's Aboriginal Corporation now. So it's been a win-win relationship there.